Right, good morning, everybody. Right, should we make a start? Hello, good morning. Welcome to the first session of the Oxford Real Farmer Conference. I'm going to start out with something critically important, which is this carpet's really nice, so you're not allowed to drink beverages in this room. So apparently speakers are exempt, but the rest of you, I'm afraid, if you could abstain for the next hour and a half, that would be great. Really excited to bring today's session to you and get the conference started. So we've got 3 speakers today and 2 chairs. I'm the boring chair. I'm in charge of telling you about the carpet and timekeeping. I'm Harriet. I'm part of the sustainability team at Riverford. Guy is the exciting chair in charge of asking questions. He's also intimated that he might have some opinions he feels compelled to share. Clearly came about as much of a surprise to you guys as it did to me. So the way we're going to do this is, this session is basically about practically looking about what regenerative agriculture looks like across the globe, like 3 different continents. We've got some brilliant speakers, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We've asked each one of them to kind of talk about what regenerative agriculture looks like, where they're from, and to think about how that's adapting with climate change, like what lessons we maybe can move across continents as we all start to tackle more extreme weather events. So we'll take 1 or 2 questions after each of their presentations, then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion and a discussion with Guy, and then we will open it up to a much wider Q&A. So to get us all started, I would invite Perrine to start off with our first presentation.
Thank you. So my name is Perrine. I'm the co-founder of a small farm in Normandy, in France. We've created with my former husband this farm something like 20 years ago, and the farm is called La Ferme du Bec-et-Loin, the Bec-et-Loin farm, quite well known nowadays for permaculture. I forgot the thing. And I was asked today to talk to you about the way we created the farm and what are, to me, the key to success to farm in a climate change environment. And when we started the farm in 2003, we knew nothing about farming. We had no training at all. We were just daydreamers, kind of, willing to be self-sufficient for the family and eventually for the friends and the neighbors. But step by step, we found it very interesting to farm. And to me, as of today, that's the best job in the world. Very fulfilling, both intellectually and I would say physically even. And when we started the farm, from day 1, we wanted to be organic certified. That's how we started. But we knew right at that point that climate change was there, and also at some point we would lack oil. I mean, the peak oil was quite unknown in France, but I was coming from a different background because I used to be an international business lawyer before being a farmer. So in the world I used to work in, I heard about peak oil, and we were very sensitive to those issues, and we were willing to farm to feed the world, to feed the society, without damaging the earth. That's how we started. So we knew we wanted to produce vegetables, but we also produced fruits, some eggs, bread. We're in France, so bread is quite an issue. And also apple cider vinegar, apple juice. When we first started the farm, we again wanted to farm quite conventionally, organically, but conventionally with the horse. But we didn't know about permaculture at that time. Only in 2008 did we find out about permaculture. And it was a real revelation and revolution to us and the way we foresee farming and our daily job, kind of. I guess you all know about permaculture, so I'm not going to define it here. But really what struck us is that when we talked about permaculture, we were not talking about techniques, farming techniques or whatsoever. We were more talking about ecosystemic thinking and the fact that we were willing to install human systems, well, systems among which humans were, but that were environmentally friendly, economically viable, and also that would live for long years. And of course, we had to make a living on it. So it was good to dream, but at some point we had to make a living, quite a decent living for us, for the family, and so on. So permaculture's revelation to us was that we were supposed to design our farm. And today, you know, I give many advices to young farmers who set their own farms. And the first thing I talk about is design, conception of the farm. Before talking about soil, before talking about crops, about whatever, we talk about conception. Because to me, this is the key of the success of a farm nowadays, especially with the events we're going to endure in the coming years because of climate change. You have to conceive the farm as if it was a natural ecosystem. And that's what we've been doing for years. Even though we didn't know about permaculture and design at first, when we started the farm, well, common sense kind of led us to dig ponds, plant hedges, lots of shrubs, lots of trees, try to find some microclimates or create them. Otherwise, we would suffer from the strong winds, we would suffer from humidity. And that was something like 18 years ago. But nowadays, if I was to restart from scratch, I would for sure redesign the farm only based on one thing. Can you tell what that one thing would do? One thing I would pay attention in the ecosystem, the main thing. Water. When I help young people to set their farm, I tell them, whenever you go and visit a farm you want to buy, you have to pay attention to first, water. Second, water. Third, water. You see me coming. Fourth, water. And fifth, what? Energy. Not even the soil, not even the trees, not even the environment. But to me, water, even in Normandy, even in England, water is the key to our coming years when it comes to farming. I'll be speaking tomorrow about water, so you'll see that it's so important to me. But anyway, we were very much inspired by nature that we tried somehow to mimic. And among this ecosystemic way of thinking, we had to find appropriate techniques. And for that purpose, since we didn't want to damage the environment, we didn't want to use too much oil, we didn't want to use too much water, scarce water, we had to find techniques that were appropriate in that environment, in that way of thinking. And we went back to the maraîchers parisiens in the 19th century. They were so good, technically speaking. I mean, Paris, of course, everything was different. Leave it with me. But Paris, at that time, was self-sufficient in terms of fruits and vegetables. Downtown Paris. And those guys, of course, they were growing crops on manure. Basically, their soil was manure, not even soil. Still, they were so good. They would produce watermelon and melon in May. To me, it's a miracle. I can't even do that nowadays. So they were so good. So we were very much inspired by the way they would grow their own crops, the way they would harvest and sell, even though all the circumstances were different. But still, we are now seeking to revive such forgotten techniques. So you see, we have a permaculture ecosystemic frame, which is the farm, among which we're going to apply techniques that we've been picking up here and there, very much inspired by maraîchers parisiens, but I was also myself very much inspired by Japanese and Korean techniques, because in my previous life I used to live in Asia, so I was very sensitive to that. And in this ecosystemic environment, we paid attention to the soil, of course. We've planted a lot of trees, digged ponds, planted hedges, and we were very careful to make sure that every single place where we would grow crops on the farm would be a small ecosystem by itself. So basically the farm, the global ecosystem, which is the farm, is kind of a mosaic of small ecosystems here and there. Therefore, since every single system is almost autonomous, they can be resilient. When a strong wind comes, that's okay. They manage to overcome. When flood, which is more and more recurrent, comes, they manage to overcome, and so on. So, you know, the output of such techniques was so good that at some point engineers and researchers came to the farm, the INRA, which is the Institute for National Research on Agronomy, came to the farm in 2010, and they led a study for 5 years. And they found out that on 1,000 square meters, which is nothing when you talk about farming, you can grow as much food than on 1 hectare, 1 hectare 0.5, which is amazing. Without tractor, without oil. Of course, it's quite intensive. It's even highly intensive. Of course, you do everything by hand, so it's quite physical, it's quite tiring, but it works. It works. So why don't we replicate small food production related ecosystems here and there instead of trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger again? Because that's what's happening at the moment in France. And we are actually in the middle of a big farming crisis in France at the moment because of farming of the organization, but also because of the fact that we don't manage to sell healthy food anymore. Right after COVID, there was this huge downfall into the sales of organic product. And it's pretty tough at the moment. So the small farmers who kind of took after us and wanted to set their own micro farms, very small farms, well, they're not struggling technically speaking, and they managed to face climate change issues, but they struggle when it comes to sell the food. So that's a pity. Anyway, if we come back to the farm and the techniques, agroecology and agroforestry are the keys to growing proper vegetables that can fight against pests. Well, they won't fight against pests, but you won't have too much pests on your farm if you have so much diversity. Biodiversity kind of protects itself. You know, the more flowers you have growing among your vegetables, the more tree you have in your gardens, the less pests you have, because you have as many pests as in Mother Nature, but they tend, all those fragrances, all those colors, they tend to protect your crops from the pests, from all the insects and so on, because they don't know where to bite anymore, they don't know where to attack anymore. So, again, I'm coming back to the ecosystem and the mindset that one must have when willing to grow crops on a micro farm, because to me, this is the key. One ecosystem based on guilds, on good associations of crops in the farm is the key to resilience, is the key to fighting against climate change consequences. One thing that struck me when I understood some kind of philosophical ideas behind permaculture is the way an ecosystem would function. And in nature, if you have a proper look, you have 2 stages when it comes to communicating between species. You have a first phase, which is cooperation. When a tree and a shrub grow with each other, first of all, they try to cooperate because they may have, incentives from one another. They may help each other. So first phase, they cooperate. Second phase, usually they compete because they struggle for the light, they struggle for the water, and so on. But the magic of the natural functioning is that at some point, cooperation and competition will succeed to each other. And it's a ring of competition and cooperation coming one after another, day after day, year after year. And at the end, the best competitor in the ecosystem, in the guild, will be the winner. But the small one will understand that if it keeps on cooperating with the big one, then it's going to do good also. So competition at some point will be the best phase that they can achieve. So when you understand this, when you set your own farm and you create the ecosystem, you will try to create guilds everywhere you can. So yeah, I mentioned that. So before you mobilize an ecosystem, first you have to remember that the ecosystem was existing before you. So whatever techniques you use, whenever you want to create a pond, to dig a pond, to create an edge, to plant trees, you have to remember that before you and before your good ideas, there was something functioning. And how do you intervene? How do you make sure that you won't be intervening too much in the ecosystem? So you have to recreate ecosystems while knowing how ecosystems function in order to respect the way they function. I kind of mentioned it, but at the moment in France, the farming system is on the verge of a huge crisis. We've got 48% of the farmers who will retire by 2030. Which means in a few years. So it's terrible because their farms will be bought by bigger farmers and they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So small-scale farmers who feed the territory and the society will kind of disappear. So we have to fight not to let that happen. And at the moment, I'm restarted a new project, which is a collaborative system, because I cannot see any other way to make sure that those small-scale farms will survive, or the farms that are feeding the people and the territory. So I'm trying to buy a big farm. A big farm in France is 120 hectares or so, on which I'm going to set 7 or 8 different types of producers. And all together, we're going to mutualize all the investment, we're going to mutualize all the equipments, and we're going to be able to sell the products together, and hopefully things are going to work. So I'm trying to set that project right now and to get researchers to study it, because, you know, in France we have to prove every single thing we do. If you have a stamp, that's even better, like we did at the Ferme du Becqueroin. So I'm trying to redo the same with a collaborative farm. Last word, I'm going to show you one of the reasons I'm here, which is the release of the third term of Living with the Earth, which is a triptych that we've written with Charles. So the first and the second one were released a few months ago, and this one will be released very soon, or is on this week, I think. And you can find it at the town hall, I was told, by Permanent Publication. And also they asked me to say that you've got a free copy of Permaculture right at the end of the conference back there. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer your questions after all.
So, Perrine, had a philosophical lawyer approach me telling me they were going to start a farm. I would have tried to dissuade you, but you would have proved me wrong. It's obviously been very successful. I'm in the mosaic of small ecosystems. I love the sound of that. And so much of what you've shown, I see similarities that I think we're going to hear for our next 2 speakers, including, you quoted, if my calculations are right, productivity of 10 to 15 times what you might expect from a conventional monoculture. On my first trip to Uganda 25 years ago, I remember sitting under a breadfruit tree and with someone with a system that looked very similar to yours, and working out the productivity of his farm compared to the monocultures next door, and we arrived at a very similar figure. So I guess in the 1980s and 1990s, I was frequently asked, as a organic farmer in the West selling to relatively affluent people, this is all very well, but you're never going to feed the world this way. Are you? Yes. And that was why I went to Uganda to see. And I would, anyway, we'll hear, but I would definitely refute that assertion. This sort of, complex agriculture can be many, many times more productive than highly input-intensive monocultures. I just want to probe you on one area. You quote the Meshark outside Paris in the 19th century, where I'm guessing workers would have typically been spending 20% of their income on food. I'm guessing maybe 30%, which may not be that dissimilar from Kenya, Uganda, probably not Peru, but I don't know, maybe not be that far. How on earth do you make it pay in a world where we've all got used to spending 10% of our income on food in the UK, perhaps 15% in France. I know you're not quite as mean about your food as we are. So could you just, I mean, it sounds absolutely perfect, but I'm sure there are lots of people, you know, who are sitting here thinking, how does this actually work commercially? Could you give us some pointers?
Well, actually, yeah, commercially, that's the weak point of the system nowadays. Even though in France, people still pay attention, a lot of attention to their food, they tend to spend less money, as you mentioned, to good quality food. I guess that Netflix subscription and the best cellular phone are more important than good food. Everybody knows that. And but still, selling the products is the issue nowadays. And you know, every single time I give training sessions to farmers from all over the world, usually, most of the time, they know a lot about agroecology, agroforestry. So I say, how can I help you? What's your problem? What's your main problem? Everywhere in the world, they say, I don't know how to sell, or I don't sell enough. So that's really the issue. But the system nowadays, at least in France, is so upside down that a lot of money is going to intermediary, people who wholesalers or people who are going to proceed food and so on. So if you manage to shortcut those people and somehow give a better recognition to the food producers themselves, then to me, you manage to make the system better. And that's why I'm trying to do with this collaborative farms. I'm willing to sell the products directly. Maybe not the farmers will be the sellers, but maybe the people. You know, we may come back to what we used to call CSA, community-supported agriculture. To me, it is necessary nowadays that the citizen get a part of the job when it comes to selling, at least a small part of it, because the system we're in, to me, represent a huge threat on the way we're going to be able to feed the population in the coming years. At least in France, we are really endangered because we produce a lot, we sell it to different countries, so it goes through the harbor from Rouen, Le Havre, and then up to, we don't even know where to feed the cattle.
I'm going to just push you a bit harder if we've... No, move on.
Okay.
Okay, well, we may have to come back to that. I'm not sure I got an answer. But Meshark, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Meshark Sikuku. I'm from Ripple Effect in Kenya, Africa. So I traveled all the way from Nairobi to UK for this conference. And when I arrived at Heathrow Airport, I felt like who have been dropped in a freezer. Quite cold, but I'm catching up. And today I'm also excited because for the first time since I arrived on Tuesday, for the first time I've seen the sunshine. Yeah, because Nairobi is very sunny, it's warm, you know, and so on. But I think whether I'm coming from a warm climate and coming to a colder climate, I think we have one thing in common, that we all want solutions on sustainable farming. That's what we want. And we all want to eat. And not just to eat, but to have healthier diets and also protect our planet. I think that is a common bond for all of us, wherever you come from, whether you come from Africa, or you come from Europe, or you come from the UK. So I'm happy to be here and to share with you some of the solutions for practical solution to climate and what we are doing and what we are working with farmers in East Africa. So Ripple Effect, we work in 6 countries in East Africa. We work in Kenya, we work in Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, and Ethiopia. And I'm happy to be here to share with you some of the experiences from the African perspective of smallholder farmers. So perhaps before I continue, I just want to take you through what I will be talking about. So I'll give a little bit about an introduction or the perspective of smallholder farmer in Africa, and we will compare that. Perhaps you'll see how different smallholder farmers in East Africa are vis-a-vis smallholder farmers in Europe or in other parts of the country. And then I will talk about just 3 solutions. 3. I know we do many, but I will just focus on 3 practical solutions that we are doing with farmers in East Africa. And then finally, I will look at the key learnings that we have and that we have learned over the years working with smallholder farmers in East Africa. So who is a smallholder farmer in East Africa? And perhaps as I describe this, you can relate this to your own circumstances in the UK and in other countries. Today morning over breakfast, I had a chat with colleagues who I met from Belgium, and already within the few minutes we had, we saw some common challenges and differences between us and what they are doing in Belgium. So who is a smallholder farmer in Africa? Now, a smallholder farmer in Africa, and I'm lucky, by the way, because I also come from one of the smallholder farms. I grew up in a smallholder farm in Western Kenya, helping my parents, my dad and my mom, to tend our small farm when I was schooling at the same time. So a smallholder farmer in East Africa is a farmer who owns less than 2 hectares of land. 2 hectares of land. And that is perhaps in countries like Ethiopia, like Kenya, and like Tanzania or Uganda. If you go to other countries, for example, Rwanda and Burundi, the land holding size is even much more smaller, like a half a hectare. So really, these farmers farm in the small pieces of land. Number 2 is the smallholder farmer in East Africa comes from a very remote areas. Remote area that has no infrastructure. The roads are undeveloped. There is no access to power, such as electricity connections to households and farms. And they have even challenges with regards to water connections, for example. 3, they rely on rain-fed farming. I mean, rain-fed farming is where you depend on rain. If it rains, you are happy. You plant your crops. If it doesn't rain, you keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. So you rely on, rain that comes from the clouds. Now, these are the characteristics of a smallholder farmer in East Africa. And these characteristics make these smallholder farmers to be much more vulnerable to climate. And that is why we are here talking about what are these global solutions. So global solutions for us and the farmers that we work with in East Africa is all about strengthening the resilience of these farmers to be able to produce sustainably for now and for the future, and at the same time protecting the lands and the environment, the resources that they use, because they depend on the natural resources. The land they have is the most important natural resource that they have to earn their livelihoods. So what I'm going to talk about is actually some of the practical solutions that we're implementing with farmers, smallholder farmers in East Africa, to ensure that they have adequate food, adequate diverse diets, and, protecting the planet. So keyhole gardening. So some of you may be familiar with, keyhole gardens. But the most important thing with the keyhole gardens is that a keyhole garden enables a farmer to regenerate a small piece of land and be able to, manage the soil health of that small piece of land, that small piece of garden, and is able to produce sustainably for herself, for her family, and also for a longer time sustainably. This is as opposed to having perhaps a larger piece of land, and because they don't have the resources, the technology to manage a larger piece of land, it becomes very difficult. So a smaller piece of land, which is well managed, is much more beneficial, is much more productive, is much more effective than having a larger piece of land, but it's unproductive because you don't have the technology to do production. So keyhole gardens are very important, and here we see layer. Leah is one of the farmers from the western region of Kenya who has adopted and is using keyhole gardens to produce sustainably for her family. So the land that you see even behind her also belongs to her, but she has decided that she will use the keyhole gardens because it's much more productive and it's much more manageable. So how is a keyhole garden prepared? These are just 5 simple steps. It is easier, 5 simple steps that you can make a keyhole garden, but the most important one is the basket that you see at the middle. So this basket here is used to, continue filling that garden with organic matter that decompose over time even as you are farming, but at the same time you can use it to do irrigation, watering it and so on. So with the time, you utilize the garden for growing, but at the same time, there is continuous decomposition of organic materials that release nutrients to the garden. Climate resilient crops. This is the second solution. And I have with me here these seeds. These seeds I have here are called amaranth. Amaranth is a seed that traditionally some people thought this is a weed that just grows by itself. Sometimes you don't have to plant it. Sometimes the cows will eat the leaves and the seeds, and then when they go there and release the cow dung, they broadcast the seeds, and they just grow. So you will find the seeds, this plant, growing where we have cow dung from cows and so on. But our collaboration with research, we did find out that this is a very nutritious crop. It's actually a superfood that has fiber in it when you consume, good for diet. It has proteins, it has vitamins, and it has micronutrients. Very important superfood. And now this crop, through our efforts to work with the research institutions and the training farmers, now it is being adopted even by the ministries of health to promote it to people who have chronic ailments, because they have found out that it is a superfood that really improves health. Now, here we have Florence from Kenya. And Florence from Kenya has a story for us. Florence, when we began promoting these seeds, the amaranth, Florence adopted this. Florence was initially just a tobacco farmer. And when she was a tobacco farmer, it was difficult to feed her family. And now she can sell the seeds. And here is part of the product that Florence is now selling. Here you can see which is ending up now even in stores. So Florence is an entrepreneur, earning income, and distributing very, very nutritious food. Those are some of the products that Florence is selling. The third and the last solution I want to share about is the push-pull. Push and pull. Simple solution of push and pull. So what happens is that these caterpillars you see here, they are very destructive to the maize crop, which is the main crop in East Africa. And what you saw also here, the flowery plants, they are called striga, which is also very destructive to the maize because they suck the nutrients from the maize roots. So they inhibit the growth of. So the push and pull we do push and pull. So we have the concept of push and we have the concept of pull. So what happens the push-pull is we have two crops that are planted complementary with the maize farm. So we have the desmodium. So we grow a line of desmodium, a line of maize, a line of desmodium, like that continuously. Then around that farm you plant bracharia. So this desmodium, what happens is that it repels, it pushes to produce some chemicals that pushes the pest out of the farm. And the bracharia has also chemicals that attract. So that is the concept of push and pull. So in the process, these pests that I showed about, they get pulled out of the farm, and you get a farm that is free of these caterpillars, that is free of these pests. A very innovative ecological way of pest and weed control. And this is Josephine from Uganda, who has also become an entrepreneur. Initially, Josephine's farm was very unproductive. The husband left the home. She went to look for a job in Kampala. And when Josephine adopted Push-Pull, she recalled her husband to come back home because land became productive. And now they're happy. You can see she's even an entrepreneur. She's now actually selling what you see on a wheelbarrow down there. She's selling it. Those are desmodium seedlings, which she's now selling to others. Josephine is now a champion of push-pull in Uganda. Finally, key learnings. One is that I think ecological innovations in pest and weed control is what we need for now and for future. Ecological pest control, such as push-pull, a simple technology that farmers can manage. Secondly, sustainable soil health management, such as using the kitchen gardens. Simple technologies that farmers can manage and that farmers can implement. And finally, looking at appropriate selection of crop enterprises. The amaranth, a simple crop, indigenous, open pollinated variety that can do well even in degraded areas and even in hard climate conditions. So selection of crop enterprises. We believe that this is also the solution for now and for future and for the climate. Finally, I just want to say that there's a lot of information that I have condensed in this presentation. So please, if you scan that, you will get more information about what I have presented. But you can also grab me, you can also catch up with me in any of these sessions as we're here. And then you'll get more information about these solutions. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Meshark. Full disclosure, I've worked with Ripple Effect for the last 20 or 25 years, and I think they are just the most extraordinary and effective organization in bringing about change, particularly in East Africa. I did ask you all to talk about techniques and not the broader thing, but actually I'm really glad that the marketing has come into it a little bit, but both because I'm struck by our first two speakers, that the importance of actually being able to sell your crop in a fair way. That's one thing that I've taken from your talks. I'm just wanted to ask a little bit, the push-pull technique, actually Riverford did sponsor the adoption of this technique. And I have to say, when I first read the spiel about it, I thought, yeah, come on. That's too good to be true. And but anyway, in November, Meshark took me to a farm where I did witness this with the most fantastic crop of maize, intercrop with desmodium, with bracharia around the outside. The farmer had failed to sow a desmodium in one area, and it was completely devastated by the corn borer. So if I ever had any doubt about the effectiveness of this technique, it was dispelled. It was incredible. But I just wanted, why maize? I mean, the first farm you took me in Western Kenya, it broke my heart, actually, to see this woman who had worked all season to sow her maize, and it was almost 100% crop failure because the rains had failed. Water, water, water. But even if they didn't fail, it just seems like such hard work. All the work is done manually. There is no... there's not even a draft animal, let alone a tractor. It just seems like so much work compared to some of the perennial crops, which seem, or indeed amaranth. The amaranth, it's not a once-off harvest. You harvest the stem and then it produces another one. So it's almost like a perennial grain crop. It's not quite perennial, but there seems so many better ways to feed yourselves. I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to know from you, why maize wherever you go? The world's obsessed by it. I mean, in this country, the other end of the spectrum, I mean, maize hates growing here, and we're obsessed with growing it as well. What is it?
Thank you, Guy. Why maize? Why maize? Well, two perspectives of it. Number one is maize has been adopted by farmers in East Africa since the introduction of conventional farming through the agrarian spread, and and so maize was introduced, fertilizers were introduced, the chemicals were introduced, and I think that is where we went wrong from the first point, because farmers were advised through extension systems that this is the best crop to grow. But initially, farmers used to grow traditional crops that are indigenous, and there are many. We have the millet, we have the sorghum, we have the potatoes, we have indigenous vegetables. But I think, I have always said, that I think we misadvised farmers through that process, and we redirected them to maize, and they stuck to maize, and they overdepend on maize. And so if there is no maize, there's no food. And that is a misconception. So as ripple effect, that is what we are trying to change, promoting diversification. And by the way, climate change now has come, and it is posing new challenges with pests such as what I showed, the fall armyworm and the stalk borer, and lack of rain and extended periods of drought. So it is a very difficult, and that is the narrative that we are trying to change. Showing farmers that we have better alternatives that are resilient to climate and that can provide nutritious food sustainably, and not just maize. It's the same thing that we are talking to farmers. Although it's very difficult sometimes for farmers to change suddenly, but it is a process of mindset, changing how people think, changing the diet. And even the other problem is now what we are seeing, the changing diets. For example, you see on TV every day, companies that are processing food, they are saying, yes, your maize will look very good if you use this, if you use that. And so it is changing people's minds. So it is something that, we are trying to change. It is a process, and I think we'll be there. And climate change is also now coming in, forcing people, because they have to sleep hungry. And when you talk to them, because they slept hungry, they listen.
Thank you. Rafael, you're responsible for all this maize.
Yes, yes, for this maize and for this mess. Well, hello, thank you all for being here. I'm Rafael. I come all the way from Peru in the south. Of course, it's chilly here. I come in the south this summer. I'm very glad that all of you are here, and I'm going to present the experience of a farm that I used to manage. And in this experience, how do we try to adapt to the climate change? So thank you very much for being here. I've been working in organic agriculture 20 years, and mainly with lots of smallholder farmers. Also in Peru, there are smallholder farmers like 2 hectares, half of an hectare, and so on. But what I'm going to present here is more a ginger farm. So whereas Peru, I think all of you know, it's in South America facing the Pacific Ocean. So we have a desert. Our coastline is desert, just like Namibia is the Atacama Desert, one of the driest that goes up. And then you have these highlands that are the Andes. So for understanding Peru, you have to understand that it's a vertical place. So the farms are vertical, they are not flat. So in most of the farms, we don't care about tractors because they can't even walk there. They will turn around. No? So we have these huge Andes and the Amazon basin, and there we have a place that is very special, that is like the clash of two titans. There's this huge Amazon jungle and the Andes, and the jungle tried to climb up and tried to get it, but it didn't make it because the Andes are so high. So in this part is where the cocoa, the coffee, the coca, and the ginger grows. Well, this is, of course, Peru have an Asian civilization. We have here, this is Moray, that is an Inca place that is kind of a laboratory of different altitudinal places or ecosystems. And this is maybe where the mess started with the maize, because, you know, maize does not exist in nature. Maize is not a natural thing. Maize was made from teosinte. They made it. So maybe over there is there are the where they made it. No, of course they have a lot of symbolic things, and they nowadays have ancient agricultural and solar calendars. No? Of course, we use Chacana and symbols as ancient calendars that goes with the solstice and the equinox. Since we are in the south, for us, Christmas is in June, because it's where we call it the Inti Raymi, where it's that the sun comes again. It's our winter solstice, like your Christmas here, when the sun come up. So this is all the ancient things, and of course we have a strong connection with the land, and we consider it our Mother Earth, but it's the Pachamama. And until today, there are still this connection and these rituals and these payments to the earth and this respect and this kind of connection has not been lost. So that's kind of an introduction. Now let's go to the farming place. First, this is a farm, a ginger farm, but when we received it, it was most not conventional, but most monocropping farm, and it was kind of degraded. And the first thing that we made it kind of intuition. You know, ginger has a two-year period, and when the ginger grows, then it comes down to the roots, and you could start harvesting. But when it comes down to the root, it appears the weeds. But we don't take it out because it's already down. But the weeds are in the jungle. The weeds are trees. So when we harvest, we have almost half a year tree, and we made it the harvest, not harvest all, but let them over there, like a selection harvest. Not because for harvesting the ginger you have to overturn the soil. So kind of intuitive, we said let's take these trees, and the trees grow up very fast. And of course, we put also, for regenerating the land, cover crops of kudzu. Kudzu is a very aggressive Japanese legume that, you know, look the amount of biomass that it makes. No, this was at first making it all more intuitive. But, of course, we have the ginger and we have a little bit of lemon. And another thing that we do is, of course, a lot of cover crops around the lemon and so on. So if you are in a vertical place, we have the farm. It has like around 60 hectares. But from the river to the top, we have 600 meters of difference. So it's a vertical farm. Of course, lots of cover crops, the most of biomass that you could put on the land. And what is very, very important is to introduce the animal component. Having cows over there is kind of difficult, but we have bees, chickens. The chickens, of course, lives on the trees, and our own cattle, that is the guinea pigs. Guinea pigs are grown over there, not as pets, but of course as food also. No? So including the animal component is very important in a farm to get out the circle of it. But we need some, if we understand a farm as a living organism, we need in an organism the metabolic organs. So we put a little bit of goats that was missing over there to get the circle complete. No? Of course, compost and composting is the heart of every organic farm. But the compost, we made the compost with intention. No? And the compost is it's part of the organism that lets you reestablish let's say the ecological functionality in the farm. I know all of you knows a lot about compost, but it's very, very, very important. So I don't want to miss that. One thing that all of us have been talking is about diversified. This is a ginger and turmeric farm, and we have lemons. But besides that, there's a lot of things that we could diversify without losing the focus on the main crops. So we start diversifying without losing focus. So you see there's passion fruit, there is moringa, there's some bananas, there's another legumes. So the more you diversify it is the better. You could diversify it with natural or with crops. But you have to diversify it without losing focus, and also with a design that she said. No, it's not just throwing away whatever. You have to be the crops that works together. And then in each farm, you know your farm better, what it grows and what speak with each other. So we start to make a design. No? First was intuitive, and then we make a design. This is an agroforestry design. And another thing that is interesting is that this company, La Grama, where I work for, works with more than 400 smallholder farmers, but they own this farm more as a demonstrative plot or an research plot. This farm just provides 2% of what they sell. Most of the selling it comes from the smallholder farmers, but we use the farm with the farmers to implement and to test all these kind of methods and proof, and not to preach just from the book, just to preach what we have proof on the farm with them. But the nicest thing is that they participate in their research and they give us a lot of feedback. So we talk together with them, but we take the risk on what is working or not working. So we make this regenerative agroforestry system with ginger, and we made it with the farmers together. And it was a success because, as she said, the production of monocrop ginger and the production of the ginger in the system were almost the same, but we have all the extra production of the system. And the other thing is that we have much more quality, much better quality of the ginger. There was and less inputs. There was the pests were down a lot. No. Nematodes, since ginger is a root, the nematodes attack directly your selling fruit. But the nematodes go to the bananas and to the plantains and let the ginger clean. So it was good. The funny thing is, the idea of this is to replicate it with them. But they planted themselves in La Grama farm, and then they replicated in their farms. And then they're starting peer-to-peer replicate this and adapting this to their own farms. No, that's amazing. There's always pioneers that jump in the water first, and then the other ones try to get in. But we also, this farm also is a biodynamic farm, so we make all of our preparations in the farm, and of course we invite the farmers, and making the preparation is like a party, you know. And let me be very sincere to you. At the first time that I make the preparation, I don't know what I was doing. I just making some poop on the corn and putting it down. But little by little, you don't need to understand it. By making it, you start getting into the sense of it, and you start getting into it, and it will work. And you have to choose to believe and for that to work. You know? So we have this preparation making party, the application. You see, that's the lemon field, but you see there's a lot of cover crop over there. Down there, there's the river. But the river does not irrigate. This is just for the rain. And what happened here is that you have seasons. You have winter, you have summer, but in the tropics you don't have season. There's always hot. So you have to. It doesn't seem that there are seasons, but there are. And the plants, they subtle, they know it. So we have other ways to see how the rhythms of nature change, and one of them is by seeing the rivers, you know, that comes up and down. This is the same river in different times of the year. You see all around is green everywhere, but the rivers are up and down. So you have to start making more subtle or develop more subtle antennas to check out the changes through the seasons in the tropics. And also to cultivate the ability to perceive. Here we have at the left a turmeric plant, and in the right a ginger plant. And they are, if we say it botanically, they are the same family, they have the same flower formula or whatever. But as you see, they are opposite in their expression. The turmeric has these big, bold leaves, and down in the roots, it has like fingers, it goes down. While the ginger is the opposite. The roots are more broad or good, and the leaves are more spiky. So even though they are the same family, the same, let's say, botanically family, they have the opposite expression. And to try to understand and to check out this expression of the plants and of your crops is important to cultivate the ability to perceive. Another thing in the farm, we have this rock that emerged from the mountain, and it becomes like a place, like the second place of the farm, because it was where the rock, the mother rock that creates the soil, comes out to us. No, so having a place like this where the rock of the mother of the mountain comes out and tell us, it's like a sacred place, or having a place that you could reverence your own land is also very important. And the nice thing is that this impulse or this vision, of course, spans within the farmers and within all around. And the function is to create high quality food, and food that not also nourish your body, but also nourish your soul and your spirit and your enemy. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rafael. I'm really struck by the similarities, the themes, the importance of design, which I have to say I put no thought into whatsoever on my farm. Diversity, complexity, composting, integrating livestock. These are very common themes across the world. I thought maybe the purpose of this session would be to convince the audience that this was the future. I don't know, I feel in no doubt myself. I don't know if anyone else does, really. I think it's really, perhaps the question is, how do we persuade the other farmers? And I know in Kenya, Meshark, there's tremendous pressure. You've talked about maize, to grow maize intensively in monocultures. probably at a larger scale. I know in Peru there's a huge amount of export. I'm guessing a lot of it grown at scale and probably pressures to. How do we get these techniques adopted? And what is the, James Rebank talked about resistance, what is the resistance that we're going to encounter and how do we overcome it? Starting with you, Rafael, if that's okay.
Well, I think, of course, it's a peer-to-peer thing. You have to see it, you have to feel it. But I think that the main change should be a change of consciousness. No? People that really understand that this way, that there's no other way. That it's very easy. And I think peer-to-peer thing, I think right now we have so many farms that make so beautiful things all around. The thing is how to scale it, and that's your question. And well, there's no silver bullet. We have to work in a broad spectrum of things. We have to work in the political thing, in the financial thing for financing the transition. We have to work in the science, and we have to work in this to spread the world. So I think we could make a theory of change of science, finance, politically, and business cases, all of them together to scale this up. But in the end, I think it's not a question of technique. I think it's a question of a click on the conscience of the people, and to really believe it, and to choose to believe it, and then this will spread out in all the things.
How much of an influence is government policy? I mean, is that something you're fighting? Is there pressure towards monocultures and scaling up? Or?
Well, yes, but most of the farmers are smallholder farmers. So politics are very important. Are very important for this because one or two of government decisions could unleash a lot of not only resources but a lot of moving things. No, of course, in politics and the nice things of politics, there are different views. But if there were a civilized politics, they will talk about. So there will be resistance, but there are also a lot of people that we are here together that will believe and go for this and pressure this. In Peru is a very particular case that the more, let's say, the factory farming or the big exporting crops, they're going into the desert. And they made like what I call is a macro hydroponic thing. They make a well, they make a soluble fertilization station, and they make tubes, dripping irrigation into the sand, no soil at all, not life at all, not life in the soil, and they grow in the sand with the Israeli technique, and that's it. And I have worked all my life in organic. I respect the soil. I love the soil, but I have seen the desert transform in green and virgin. So that makes me not a Taliban of just organic, because I see this growing up in the desert, and I respect that also. It's not my point of view. It's not the way that I think farm should be doing, but it's another alternative.
Meshark, would you like to come in? We talked a lot in Kenya, and we did spend a lot of very tedious time talking to government officials, which just had to be done. But could you just talk a little bit about the pressures, and then we will get back to the techniques. I realise I've strayed here, and perhaps some questions from the audience.
Yeah, transition is a journey. It's not a one-off button that you press and things change. That is our experience, because on one hand, you will find farmers being encouraged, to grow monocultures of maize. I know in some countries where a policy is being promoted called collectivization, where there are plans even to relocate some farmers and put them in a settlement so that more land is created for a big land for monoculture, which to us is not the correct way to go. But the challenges we have is, those pressures from the policy perspectives. But I think, on the other hand, there's hope that things are changing. Last year, Kenya just developed what we call national agroecology policy for food systems transformation. And to us, that is a mindset in terms of policy change. And I know that is going to influence other countries as well. I know Uganda is also developing one. It's in the process of developing a national agroecology strategy for Uganda. And I know these are changes that we are seeing, because ideally the biggest challenge we have had is the policy direction. Because as much as we as Ripple Effect, we are working with the farmers to promote agroecology and sustainable farming, but the policy is promoting conventional, use of high input and so on. So at one point you find that, these are challenges. Farmers get confused. Do we follow this or do we follow that? But the second point also is that farmers will follow what works for them. And what works for farmers in East Africa, our experience has been, you remember I described the environment, the characteristics of a smallholder farmer. So the approach of high input agriculture in itself is a problem to farmers. It's a challenge. Because when it is the planting season they want to plant, the companies that are selling seed will hike the prices. So by 2 times. So how do you get the seeds? So what farmers will do, they will go to the market and buy grains and then come and plant, instead of looking at open pollinated varieties like these ones that will still be vigor when you plant next time. So the farmers themselves are having challenges. And I think these challenges are going to change things. The policy landscape is also changing. And I think that is where we're headed. So I think the future looks good for agroecological practices adoption by smallholder farmers.
I mean, in very similar tensions to the ones that we have in the UK and in Europe, I think. Perrine, could you talk about how you are influencing the farmers around you, and are people copying you? I completely agree with the way to influence a farmer is with another farmer, by doing something on similar land, a farmer similar to them. They're the ones they're going to copy, not an academic or me, because I'm not like them. But how have you found this, and how have you influenced people?
Well, I guess the farm has influenced a lot of people, because we've been training people for a long time now, for something like 10 years. And we've seen a lot of micro-farm that were born in France a little bit after our model. Even though what we were doing was not new, nothing was new. We didn't invent or create anything. We just went here and there and grabbed the good ideas from the people from the old time. But when we first started, permaculture hadn't met agriculture yet. So that was new, pretty new. But then, again, COVID struck, and I don't know if it's been the same in England, but in France, I really feel that there's a before and after COVID. In England, there might be before and after Brexit, I don't know. But in France, it's before and after COVID. And we've seen everything changing. All the consumers who were happy to buy good organic food before, they were willing to change their behaviors after and be more involved into consuming other goods and maybe leisure, maybe other stuff than food. So the problem we're facing now is not technical. It really is related to all the economical environment of farming. And we are now struggling to train newcomers in that specific field of microfarms, because it is getting difficult to make a decent living with those small farms. So it is, funny enough, more challenging nowadays than it used to be a few years ago. But to me, you were asking earlier what would be the solution to spread this type of agriculture. And to me, as we say in permaculture, the problem is a solution. So climate change might be a solution. What I mean by that is that we are encountering so many floods nowadays, droughts, which we didn't know of before. Even in Normandy, in France, we didn't know about droughts, severe floods. And I guess the farmer, season after season, are seeing their soil disappearing, really, after every single flood, because they don't cover the soil. So bare soil is the worst thing you can imagine. They don't plant trees. Well, they've planted trees a long time ago, but they don't have any trees. They don't have any shrubs now, and they cannot stock both carbon and water. So because of climate change, they might have to change their behavior. Otherwise, all the richness of their soil, their tool, will disappear. But then it's going to be long. If we have to wait for those catastrophes, it's going to be long. So I have to say I'm a bit compelled nowadays, because I've been very hopeful for all those years, but because of this specific behavior people tend to have in France at the moment, I'm a bit compelled. I really don't know what to do anymore to be able to convince people to do things differently, especially when you speak with people from the government, because they are all about technology. All they believe in are drones, chemicals, GPS, satellites, and so on. And what about energy scarcity and the price of the energy, especially for us farmers?
Do you think there is any place for those technologies, robots, within your sort of system? I mean, can you see them being applied? I mean, we see in East Africa, you know, where people, I think maybe $2 or $3 a day would be the wage. In France, I'm guessing it would be, you know, 50 times that. How are you going to get the work done? Can technology help us in making these very complex systems viable in a way that they're definitely not with the sort of machinery that we're using in monocrops?
Well, I'm not an anti-technology, but I do believe that we shall consider technology as a helper, but we are the farmers, we are the brain, and nature is our best companion, and not technology. I'm completely happy with artificial intelligence helping to find new natural crops, because that's what they say they're going to develop instead of a GMO. I'm very happy to be able to work on my computer, to calculate faster, more easily. I'm happy to relate on technology when it comes to marketing, selling, logistics. Logistics is the key to our job. But I do not believe that you can replace analysis, intelligence, observation with anything else than a human being.
Okay.
15 minutes. We should probably...
15 minutes, time to get some questions from the audience. Or have you got some?
I've got some that have come in online. And
get your questions ready. We've got some coming in online.
I'm going to squeak through one or two. I'm going to start with... I really am going to squeak through it. I'm going to start with David King's, because I was actually really surprised when Meshark talked about amaranth that you didn't jump on that guy, given your enthusiasm for the possibility of selling nettles in a salad bag as like making better use of the diverse crops available. But so David's question is, you know, if increased crop diversity is one of our tools for climate resilience, for keeping people fed, but it sits outside our kind of dominant market structure, particularly our dominant supermarket structure, how do we get that like message for increased diverse plant consumption across more effectively in a kind of as a climate change response to people?
Thank you very much. So I think when we are looking at markets, I'm not sure, but perhaps we need to look at this from a contextual perspective, because the priority for different people will be different. If we have people who are going hungry and they are struggling with the basics, the priority may not be market, priority may be food on the table to feed their families and to feed themselves. That will be the priority. And in East Africa, we are working with rural farmers who are struggling to meet their needs. Basics. People who are struggling, they have no food, they have no income, they have no money for their health care, and so on. That is the scenario and the circumstance. So even before we think about market, we think about how can farmers become resilient, how can they diversify their livelihoods. So access to, cropping systems and varieties of crops and food that they can use as, food and have better, enough, healthier diet, that is a priority. From there, then we can see what do we have now to sell. You can't think about what to sell, go into the market before you get what you eat first. So I think that's a little bit of a priority. But what we do as a ripple effect is this. So after the families are now producing more, are producing enough, they can feed themselves, then we think, how do they access the markets to sell the surplus? Farmers like Florence here who are doing this is because they have the surplus. They have the surplus. So it is the surplus that they can now take to the market. They can even sell the seeds and so on. So for us, it's about livelihoods, it's about resilience, it's about diversity, it's about adaptation and so on. So, but not a niche market. A niche market will be much more appropriate to people who are already at a given level. And so their interest is to see which value chain they want to, specialize in and, make money and sell, and which is a good thing. But for the farmers we work with, that comes as a second stage where we now, they take surplus to the market.
I mean, having a surplus is probably why fat hen in a salad bag seemed like a really good idea.
I was quite struck in my 3 trips to visit Ripple Effect in East Africa, how it has progressed from subsistence farms to food security, and now the more successful ones. I remember particularly visiting Edward, who was growing amaranth, but lots of other things. And the key to his success was that he was managing to sell the stuff. And very interestingly, there'll be parallels with Perrine and probably many other people, his success came from selling it locally. He had previously sold tobacco, presumably to a processor, and it sounded like it had been a pretty miserable life and the soil was very poor. He'd improved the soil, but he was selling, it was tremendously entrepreneurial, and I think Meshark pulled me up several times. I always assumed that the amaranth or anything else that would be destined for, export for us and so on. Absolutely not. These were for local markets, and any idea that we were the saviors coming in, I had to keep repeatedly putting aside. I'm disappointed in myself that I had to. Do you want to take another one or should we take one from the floor?
Yeah, go to the audience. If there are any questions in the audience.
Anyone got a question? Hands up. Yeah. Or we can take another one online. Right. Yes,
we'll
here.
Take the blue jumper.
Microphone coming.
Oh, Henry.
Thanks. Guys, I just wonder if health is going to be people's individual, taking responsibility for their individual health is going to be something that will drive this forwards.
Anyone want to pick that up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's enough. I've been repeating kind of the same things for 20 years now, but it's not obvious to people that if they don't eat proper food, they're going to become sick or their health is endangered. So you have to fight the battle according to the modern rules. Maybe we shall get influencers to get into the piece, because people will go rather, as I mentioned, to a Netflix subscription rather than a good basket of vegetables. They don't feel like their health and whatever they eat is linked, even though you can find this information all over the place nowadays. It's not obvious. So in France specifically, because we tend to pay attention to food and good food, maybe we shall go through chef. The chefs don't promote good organic food enough to me. They promote a lot of what they do, and they do tremendously nice things, but they don't promote healthy and good things together. And we have to go and get the athletes to promote this type of food, to get people to know better about the consequences of what they're eating. But to me, they are not aware, not enough about that. And another solution would be for people to realize the strong link there is between supporting local farmers and enabling the society around us to be more homogeneous and more resilient. A few months ago, I launched a movement in France called Adopt Your Farm, because again, after COVID lockdown, I realized that all the consumers, even the ones who were interested into organic products before, they went away. Where the hell were they? And I thought, well, on a daily basis, they are working. They are busy with their jobs, so they are in the company where they are hired. So why not restarting to create links between the companies and the farms? And Adopt Your Farm is what it's meant for. It doesn't mean me as a farmer, I want to sell my vegetables to your employees. It just means me as a farmer, as a human being, I want to relate with you, other citizen, who is working in a company. And I would like the people working in companies on a daily basis to know better what farming means. Because if people are more aware about farming and what it implies, maybe they're going to waste less food. Maybe they'll be more respectful, maybe they will buy more local products, and so on. So I think one of the key is, again, to consider our society as an ecosystem with different type of ecosystem. You've got the farmers on one hand, rural area on one hand, urban areas and citizens on the other hand. And those people, they tend to ignore each other. It doesn't mean they hate each other. They just don't know each other anymore. And they don't know the challenges that we are facing when we farm. And I think that connections and communication might be one of the keys to that.
Rafael, you twitched like you might have something to say on the health issue. So I don't know if you want to chip in there on health. And then I think there was a question in the balcony, guy with the tie and the gilet. Yeah, you. I don't know if we've got, yeah, we do. Great. So while we get to that gentleman, Rafael, did you have a thought?
Well, yes. The health issue is one of the, as I said before, there's no silver bullet, but of course the health issue is one of the many things that will push this through, no? And it's more than a health issue. It's that nourish yourself or have the nourish yourself with food that truly nourish yourself, because there's so many food that is grown in a way that is just like colored corks or things that really don't have the nourish for yourself and for they just fill your gut but does not nourish yourself. So I think that I agree it's not enough, but it's one of the many points that will push this through.
Harriet, got to be opinionated here, as you've taken over by chair anyway. I've always felt very uncomfortable using the health card to sell organic vegetables, because I feel very strongly that the most important thing is that people eat lots and lots of fresh vegetables wherever they're grown. And however, as the years go by and I look at a cabbage grown organically in February without having nitrogen thrown at it every second week compared to one that has, they look, smell, feel, taste completely different. To think that that would not be reflected in their nutritional profile is absurd. Most people who keep livestock know that, how the crop's grown affects, particularly people with horses are obsessed by it. But how we can actually draw the evidence together to be able to make a claim like that, I think is going to be extremely difficult. And I think within our community here, I think that's something that we should be trying to tease out, how we can, in a peer-reviewed way, correlate nutritional status with the way the crop has been grown and the health of the soil. I think that's a big challenge that we need to grasp. If anyone else is I would personally be prepared to throw a few quid at this, but it's going to be expensive. I think we probably need people to come together and do it collectively. I think we've got a question upstairs.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic presentations, team. Really inspiring. I think permacultural systems going forward, in my opinion, are going to play a much bigger role than we actually anticipate. Firstly, this question's kind of aimed at Meshark. I was very privileged to have spent a fair bit of time at COP26. speaking to the Kenyan delegate, discussing the idea of the Kenyan seed company boycotting the livestock industry, or regional livestock production in Kenya, in an attempt to control communities. This was her opinion, this lady. Forgive me, I can't remember her name. And it dawned on us in the group that WTO regulations, free trade, and corporate intervention at a regional level, which is really important, or at least I sensed it was really important to this lady in terms of community-focused food production systems. I just wanted to get your views, but also the group's views on free trade, corporate intervention, in terms of its impact on climate mitigation at farm level. You know, we need to develop regional, localized community solutions to overcoming climate change. Where do we think the corporations are going to play in terms of their impact on inhibiting positive change?
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, these are some of the challenges that we have. But look at it this way. Because of the free trade agreement, look at a scenario where we have a smallholder farmer who has struggled to get some money. Perhaps he has borrowed, he has planted, and then he has harvested some maize. The expectation is that he's going to sell this maize to the local market, get some income. And this income is very important because it is a matter of meeting the needs or not. This farmer has a child to take to school. The government does not pay school fees for people in colleges and in schools. We pay school fees ourselves. The government does not pay for our health services. We pay ourselves, including those smallholder farmers who have no income. This is a crop that he needs to take to the market and get that income to meet those needs. Now, because of the free trade, we have another country that is developed, and because that free trade is bringing in a lot of maize at a cheaper price. So you are subjecting very vulnerable people against very strong people who have the resources to produce. Are we fair? Is that justice? We are making smallholder farmers much more vulnerable through these free trade agreements. And that needs to be relooked at. Because free trade, I think it is fair among the equals, not among the unequals. And so that is why we are encouraging our farmers and appealing to the governments in East Africa that it is not a matter of free trade, it's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of justice. That each and everybody should have access to the market and an income.
Yeah. Our three speakers have described agricultural systems which are very knowledge intensive. You know, they're not input intensive. No one's making money out of selling you inputs on the whole. And unfortunately, I would say, since my parents started farming in the 1950s, the direction that agriculture has taken, certainly in the developed world, probably across most of the world, has been determined more by the needs of those selling stuff to farmers than by farmers themselves. And it's hugely encouraging, I think, to see farmers taking back some of that control. And there does seem to be more of an emphasis on knowledge-intensive agriculture, which I think we should be hugely encouraged by. But to go back to the question, I don't think any of us should kid ourselves that capitalism and the free market can solve the problems that we face. They are just too complex and nuanced, and they're, you know, for something as blunt and crude as market forces to provide the solution. And we just need to try and persuade our politicians of that, because really the only alternative we're faced with is setting a framework up where at least we can have free trade which will be fair amongst equals. I love that, Meshark. That because at the moment it's not among equals, and we see farmers getting screwed around the world, and I'm talking too much, and I'm aware that we may be out of time.
I feel like we should persuade politicians to sort of take down capitalism. Seems like a Guy-esque appropriate question to kind of end the session on.
This is the first and the last thing that I've ever chaired. When I agreed with Harriet to chair it, I had decided that at 64 it was time to move from being a gobby doer to being a wise facilitator. I've convinced myself that I'm just too gobby to ever do this again. So you won't be cursed with me again. But I think we're out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you.